Okay, then, so let's start with actual grammar, okay, with actual revision of grammar. Let me see, I need to share my screen. And let's start with this kind of revision and present. Okay, well, so let's start with some basic definitions. Okay, all of these definitions are in my book. Okay, basically, it depends on the way in which we see language. Then this will have a say in the way in which we see grammar. So let's start with some definitions of language. Okay. The first one, pay attention when you read them, you know, the yellow.
Excuse me, Jose, yes. In the WhatsApp group, Santiago is saying that it's trying to enter the room, but it's not, I don't know, he's waiting.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Well, I was saying that you should pay attention to the year of publication of these works when these definitions came out. The first one is by Sapé, 1921, 100 years ago. Which says that language is a purely human and non-instinctive method of communicating ideas, emotions, and desires by means of voluntarily produced symbols. Okay, I will ask you to silence the microphones unless you're going to ask a question, so as not to interrupt, but otherwise feel free to interrupt me. Okay, well, so basically, language is what we use for communication. This is what this guy is saying. Okay. Some other definition, here comes Chomsky, 1957, in the very first book by Chomsky. Chomsky considers that language is a set, finite or infinite, of sentences, each finite in length and constructed out of a finite set of elements. In some other definition, this one by Halliday, 1994, he considers that language is a network of systems or interrelated sets of options for making meaning. Now, if we start to pay attention to kind of, let's say, the keywords, because there is no point in, let's say, remembering a definition by heart, okay? But in the first case, the one by Sapir, which is a very traditional definition, or let's say, Sapir is one who follows a very traditional approach to grammar, okay, to language and to grammar. Basically, you know, it's kind of a naive definition, okay? So language, meaning, if you ask every person, your brother, sister, mother, son, or whoever, what is language, they will come up with something like this, what we use to communicate, okay? And we communicate by resorting to some kind of code, okay, some symbols, okay, right? In the second case, well, I guess that most of you must be familiar that this guy Chomsky started kind of a revolution midway through the 20th century, okay? And he couldn't care less about communicate. Well, he does in a way, but the most important thing is, you know what? When we speak or when we use language, when we read, when we talk, when we interact with something, what we produce is sentences all the time, okay? And this is what Chomsky considers language to be. Okay, so remember this key word. For Chomsky, language is sentences. In a way, for example, I'm systematically, whenever I'm talking, you know, I'm producing sentences orally, okay? I may have interrupt for some reason and then go back to whatever, okay? But in a way, I'm meant to produce a sentence, okay? Sometimes you can very well detect what I was about to say, okay? The number three, the third one, is not necessarily sentences, but language is what we choose to say, the options. We choose out of the very many possibilities that we have, which make up a system, okay, to convey some meaning. So here we have like three very different approaches to grammar, to language, and therefore to grammar as well. Okay, the first one will be a traditional one. The second one will be a generative one. And the third one is a functional approach to grammar. Okay. As you can see, there exist different views on what language is, right? Meaning, if people in the world do not necessarily agree with each other on what language is, well, no wonder we people as the Joaquin will not necessarily agree with each other on well too many respects. So far so good? Now, what about the definitions of grammar? One of them says that grammar is a study of morphology, which deals with the form of words, and syntax, which deals with the arrangement of words into sentences. So, according to this approach, grammar is like made up of, let's say, two areas, two big areas, morphology and syntax. Okay? In some other case, again by Chomsky, the grammar of a language is to be thought of as a device of some sort for producing the sentences of the language under analysis. And I guess that I have got some other definition by Chomsky, this one from a book that appeared in 1986, which is that a grammar is a collection of descriptive statements concerning sentences understood independently of the mind. Now, again, if we focus on some key words there, one of them says that grammar is basically morphology and syntax. Okay? A second one says that grammar is what we resort to for producing sentences. How is it that we produce sentences? And the third one, even for Chomsky, is, okay, sentences independently of the mind. I guess that the first two are kind of very straightforward. Now, we will need to clarify what Chomsky means by independently of the mind. Well, think of the different backgrounds that all of us and all of the people in the world have. I mean, well, all of us, you know, have been to, I don't know, let's say primary school, secondary school, tertiary level, etc. Okay, but as you very well know, not all of the people have done so. right? For whatever reason, there exist way too many people in the world who have never been to school at all. I guess that you must remember this case of the M girl. You remember this girl that probably like a month ago was taken, I don't know where, who had been like away from her mother for a couple of days or so. You know what I mean? And now, I mean, she was taken from, I think it was Lugano, I think, I don't know, to what other part of the city or the province. And now people got to recognize that some 7-year-old girl, now round the corner, I mean, not far away, okay, has never been to school. Okay, you know what I mean? At the age of 7, for whatever reason, she had never attended school or kindergarten or whatever. And you know what? Still, she does have got grammar. Meaning what? If you say whatever in, let's say, Spanish, of course, she will understand what you mean. You tell her the equivalent of, let's say, can you pass me the salt, or do this and do that, okay? And she will understand what you mean. So you know what? She does have grammar in her mind. So grammar is not necessarily what you learn here at the Joaquin, or in the formal training. All of the people in the world do have grammar. Okay. This tells you that, Chomsky considers grammar to be, well, the definition that he gives of language at some other point is that language is a genetic endowment. Meaning what? If you're a human being, doesn't matter how intelligent you are, how hardworking you are, let's say, how well trained on whatever you are, or whether you lack every kind of training, you do have grammar. Just for the fact that you are a human being, which is not the case for a parrot, or for a whale, or for a monkey, or for whatever other animal. Okay, right? Chomsky is interested in the way in which people get to produce sentences. Okay, what he means in particular, he focuses on, people's mother tongue. He focuses on L1. Okay, right? How is it that whenever we say something, okay, very early in life, because when we come into this world, we are told, do this, do that, and well, whatever. And out of this, we will eventually end up producing sentences. Okay. Well,
Jose, and what about semantics? Because the third definition talked about meaning.
Okay.
And
yes.
Because it's more morphology, syntax.
Well, okay. But this was the definition. That's why I said that is a kind of naive definition of grammar, okay? Because at that point, there was no such a thing as, let's say, so many courses around the world on, let's say, semantics 1, semantics 2, phonology 1, phonology 2. Like, there existed at that point courses that dealt with syntax and courses that dealt with morphology. Semantics is something rather newish, I would say. Okay, well, newish, I would say. Now it has got like, it is 80 years old, okay? But at that point, okay, this person kind of disregarded the idea of semantics. Yes, good point. Well, now that you mentioned that, for example, is it the case that phonology is not part of grammar? Okay. For some
Yes.
Well, I don't know. I don't quite agree. To tell the truth, you know, grammar, in my view, grammar covers everything. Because when you learn, let's say an L2 or a new word in L2, you don't just learn, you know, the category and the possible functions that it can carry, but you know how to pronounce it. You know how this will interact with some other words in a phrase or close sentence. Okay. So
I don't know why I see all white. I don't know.
Because no, I passed on to the following.
Oh, great.
I'm about to share some other definitions. Okay.
Sorry, I've got a question regarding Chomsky's definition. When he says that language is genetic, he means that we all have the ability to learn language by hearing, right? Just by being exposed. But what if a human is in isolation, you cannot learn grammar or language, right?
Yes, right. Yes, exactly. The ability to produce language, of course, if you are exposed to some language. Yes, good point. Of course, if the only things that I hear are like, I don't know, let's say monkey's language, okay, I will be able to produce some kind of monkey's language in some way. But I won't be able to, because, you know, the point is that with language, you can do way too many things. I mean, monkeys, of course, or any other animal that you can think of course, you know, they can communicate with each other in a specific way. But for example, monkeys cannot think of an imaginary situation. Monkeys cannot come up with something like, if I were a human being, I would do, I don't know, such and such a thing. Which is what human beings can. Okay, we can very well say, if I were an animal, I would speak like this and like that, and I would complain about this and about that. Okay, we can even think of imaginary situations that have never existed. Okay, right? But animals can't. Okay, so their, let's say, language is much more limited, so much so that it's not called language, to tell you the truth. Okay, right? Can you follow?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, then let's see some of the definition of grammar, which is that grammar is the study of the paradigmatic aspects of language. Again, language as a meaningful choice between oppositions, where meaning is the function of a unit in a context. And some other definition says that grammar is the natural, inherent meaning-making system of the language, a system that governs the way words come together to form meanings, and grammar is also the study of that system, the various theories or perspectives that attempt to understand and describe it. These two definitions are functional definitions of grammar. In particular, again, look at the key words that I've identified. The first one, let's say, grammar is considered to be something like choice. Let's clarify what we mean by choice, okay? Or what within the functional grammar, what is this idea of choice? For example, if you think of the number of interactions that you have had, that you have made so far, okay, in particular whenever it started, somebody said, Jose, sorry, meaning at some point she felt the need to say something, and she has chosen to say, Jose, sorry, but meaning for some reason she felt the need to apologize, okay, because she understood kind of internally that interruptions require an apology. Okay, somebody could have said, no, can you please explain this and what you mean by paradigmatic aspects of language? Directly. Or you can say, can I ask you a question? Well, somebody even said today, at some point, may I ask you a question? Okay, so all the time, you know what? We choose what to say. Sometimes we are not aware of the choices that we are making, in particular, if, of course, you speak very good language, right? And you don't need to think, oh, shall I say it this way or this other way? You just produce it. But you know what? Whenever you have to ask a question, for example, you resort to different strategies. Meaning there is a system of questions. Okay, can I ask you this? May I ask you that? Can you explain this? Or you could have said, explain this, please. Okay, probably more than a question and request, okay? But you see, in a way, they are very connected with each other. So all the time, whenever we speak, we make choices out of the different possibilities that we have available in that language. Okay, we make choices. Okay. Now, what paradigmatic aspects? What is the paradigm? You know what a paradigm is? Let's say, well, a paradigm, for example, is the set of rules that at some point are like the norm. Okay. Meaning, at some point, we get to know this when there is a kind of paradigmatic change in some respect. Think of this so-called inclusive language. Okay. Now, like, I don't know how long, probably, let's say 30 years ago, people would mention, let's say, if you mentioned at that point inclusive language, you say, what? What do you mean by that? Okay. Or a couple of years ago, now, if you talked about here about the ASPO and the DISPO and, you know, this, etc., you say, what? What does that stand for? Okay. So for some reason, there is something external to our interaction that makes us eventually change or reject some change. Think of Feynman. Okay, he would come up and say, no, come on, talk to me in Spanish. That is not in the, or that has not been considered even by the Royal Academy of Spanish. Okay, so talk to me, you know, in a normal way. So he will reject that change. Eventually, well, this inclusive language becomes the norm or not, okay, we'll have to wait, and probably in, let's say, 10 or 50 years' time, okay, that is the norm. So there has been a change, okay? Well, even In English, for example, you very well know that today, let's say present-day English, what are the rules of present-day English, are not the same as the ones that they have in the Elizabethan period. Okay? You understand what I mean? Another thing is that all the time we use language with a specific function, meaning to ask a question, to ask for an apology, to let's say give an order, to socialize with somebody, to greet somebody, to tell somebody something, to etc., etc., etc. Okay, to make a suggestion. Way too many functions that we convey with language. And the other thing that is kind of very important within this area is that of meaning, which means that whenever we use language, we mean to say something for a specific purpose. Okay? In this way, what we have is like the three approaches to grammar. Okay, three big approaches to language and therefore to grammar as well. Okay, which are the traditional one, the generative one, and the functional one. Now, they have, or they focus on different things, let's say, with a different aim. In traditional grammar, basically, the focus is to be able to describe whatever language. Okay? What we mean by describe a language. For example, think of when you started to learn English. Of course, if we are native speakers of Spanish, and let's say, imagine in our first classes, we tend to produce something like, the book red is on the table. All of us have made such a mistake. Why? Because we are transferring the rules that we have in our mother tongue to that of English. Okay? Then at some point, our teachers corrected us, and eventually, either intrusively or not, okay, with a number of examples, okay, until we got to internalize the rule, and we got to say, eventually, the red book is on the table. So now we have got a description, meaning, you know, the adjective should come before the noun. Okay, the object should pre-modify the noun in most of the cases in English, as opposed to what we have in Spanish. Right? So this is to be able to describe the language. The point is that if we ask the typical question, why? At that point, our teachers tended to say something like, I don't know, it's like that, full stop. Okay, so much so that even today, probably many of you don't even know why that is the case. Meaning, that is the case in English. Okay, what about, I guess that most of you are teaching, or some of you are teaching at different levels. Okay, and if a student of yours comes and asks you, why should I say the red book, the big table, the black dog, and so on and so forth, rather than, you know, the other version? Okay. So, what is it that we say? What about if I am your student and I come up with such a question? What would you tell me?
I will provide the traditional version. I know is that the correct word. The one you said, the red book instead of the book red.
Yes, but my question is why? As a student, child, children
Well,
tend to say,
it depends.
"What?"
Sorry, I
Yes?
think it depends on the level you're teaching, because maybe you will try something easier for, I don't know, kindergarten or primary school.
Yes, definitely. Let's suppose
Maybe
I
you could
am
say, yes, sorry.
either 10 years old. Okay, what would you tell me?
Sorry, how old?
10 years old.
I would say that it's something to do with the organization of the sentence. And then you may start teaching I don't know how to say it, but the charts, like, okay, first the size, then the color, then the noun and all that.
Okay. Good.
Maybe I would say that in Spanish, we first present the object and then we describe it. Libro rojo. But in English, what happens is that first we describe the object and then we present it. Red book.
Okay.
So we begin instead of from inside out, we go outside in.
Yes, but what you are doing now is describing what you're doing. You're still not telling me why.
Probably because we try to follow a standard instead of I was told in grammar 1 that grammar is what people say. In fact, which is what we say ungrammatical. Like, for example, you was, that is said. People say that, native speakers say you was, but we are supposed to teach the traditional grammar, or not traditional, but the standard, right? And we should correct that.
Okay. Yes.
Like
okay.
here in Spanish, people say vistes, and we know, we understand that is ungrammatical in our language. Teachers of Spanish language should not teach that.
Okay, fine. But
sorry, I don't think I would use, like, I wouldn't teach the order by teaching grammar. I don't know if you follow me. The thing is that for me, a 10-year-old isn't even aware of his own native language. I mean, perhaps he doesn't understand what a noun is, what an adjective is. I mean, you may say that, but he can't give meaning to that. So I would use like games or another kinds of things, not those terms, because I mean, you can say those terms and you can even write, I don't know, adjective plus noun plus, and you can give examples and all that, but they won't follow that.
Yes, you're right. But in a way, what all of you have resorted to is a description of the right way to produce it in whatever language. This is to describe. Okay? Think of, let's say, I don't know, the use of the present perfect. In our variety of Spanish, we don't resort to that much. Okay? Okay, why is it that they say, I have done my homework, okay? And in Spanish, we tend to say hice la tarea, full stop. Okay, so then you will, come and explain different ways that whenever this has a connection between the past and the present and blah, 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 all that stuff that you very well know, okay? Right? In different ways, with all of the different uses, depending on how intelligent or what the level of your student is, okay? But still, you know what? There is something that you're not saying, which is why. And this is what Chomsky is interested in the explanation. When we say explanation, that the focus of the generative grammar is on the explanation, okay, what we mean is that we want to get to understand why in language one, let's say, in language X, something, I mean, the standard rule is like this. When in some other language, the rule must be in some other way. So this is what Chomsky would be interested in. That's why, you know, in traditional grammar, going back to the aim, is you have a lot of classification. At some point, probably, we will end up getting to know, let's say, the different tenses or the different, let's say, classification of words into, let's say, nouns, adjectives, verbs, and so on and so forth. Okay? So there is a long list